Hi, this is Darren from Zendrum Studio, and today I'd like to show you a potential new product I've been working on. I think we're all familiar with this. This is a stock Zendrum merge brick. You connect your Zendrum and power to it, and it sends power to the Zendrum and then MIDI back out to your sound source. I use this as a basis for pretty much all my projects because I'm usually replacing this with some improved functionality. Whether it's the stomp block or the Shifter Pro, they all have this bass functionality. So what I'd like to show you today is this. This is a drop-in replacement for the merge brick. It has same functionality, power in, MIDI out. This is called the ZDS CC, in that it allows you to see up to 4 different CC values in real time. You use this knob here to set what CC number to show in each of these 4 displays, and it'll show the actual value behind that for any MIDI that's coming in. So this is my current Zendrum rig. It's evolved through the years. I've used rack-based sound modules before, and various flight cases and SKB cases for laptop-based systems, and always trying to pare it down, get smaller, lighter, more nimble, cut down on my setup time. And it's boiled down to this. This is a pedal board. It's based around a Mac Mini. There's a Mac underneath here. MIDI comes in through the front there. There's a jack. And that power jack right there is where my monitor plugs into. So I don't have to futz around underneath or on the sides. I plug in, I'm good to go. I run everything in mono. I've found through the years that dealing with stereo is just not worth the effort. You wind up with different parts of the audience hearing different mixes. So I do have mono coming out of the Mac. USB goes up to this DI. And since it is mono, I can basically split the output here through left and right. So one goes to my local monitor, and then the other goes to front of house. As you'd expect, I'm utilizing a Shifter Pro. That's the centerpiece of the rig. MIDI comes in, goes to the shifter. I process some shift rules, and then MIDI over USB goes down to the Mac. I'm using the MIDI out, the serial out of the shifter. That comes into the CCC over here and displays the values. There's only one DC plug that's coming into the CCC. Since this is a replacement for a merge brick, it does provide power over the MIDI input, which is powering the shifter, because the shifter can be powered from a MIDI output. And then ultimately it's powering my Zendrum. So that single DC jack is powering these 2 devices and my Zendrum. These 2 pedals are connected to the shifter, and I use them to control various CC parameters. I do have one shift rule. Right now it's on button 2, but I sometimes also use the sustain button on my Zendrum. But when that CC is active, it changes the values of these pedals. So altogether I can control 4 different CC values using these pedals. And I'm using the display up here to show what those are. I have them labeled here so you can kind of get an idea, but in the normal down mode, this right pedal is controlling my sensitivity, and in the alternate mode, I use it to affect a low pass filter, effectively controlling the amount of bass in my overall mix. Some venues, my monitor, particularly if it's on a floor that can vibrate, my bass response may be way off the charts. So I use that to tweak it. Along the same idea on this side, in that alternate mode, I use some room convolution on here. For a live venue, I'll have it set to 0, but for some more intimate spaces, I may add a little bit just to give the overall mix some warmth. And in my primary mode, this tunes my snares. I have 3 different snares that I use in my rig, and this allows me to tune them all up or down a bit. I don't know if I mentioned, but on the Mac Mini, I'm running BFD3, and its tuning capabilities are spectacular. It's very, very natural. So the problem I was having, and you can probably see where this is going, is in controlling 2 CCs with each pedal, I have no way of knowing by sight what value the CC values had. I had to use my ear. So for years now, before some songs in our sets, I'm tapping on a snare and pumping this pedal to get the tuning just right. Because for some songs I want a higher pitch snare, for others I want a low, bluesy, really flappy sounding snare. And there's no way for me to know except by ear. And so that's the situation that led me to come up with the CCC. I needed a way to visually tell the position of each pedal. But even if you're not using pedals, the same could apply to you. My Zendrum has 2 knobs on the back that I used to use before I switched to a pedal-based rig. And the same would apply there. Turning the knob, I had no way of knowing, what actual value I was hitting. Okay, so now I'd like to give you a brief demonstration of how the CCC works. As I stated previously, each of these 4 displays represents 1 CC value. To see the numbers behind them, if I hold in the program button for 3 seconds, it switches over to edit mode. And now it's showing me the 4 values. So 88, 22, 24, 25. These are relatively arbitrary. This is just how the values that I use evolved over time. But any CC value from 0 to 127 can be inputted into here. And you do that via this knob. You just turn it to set the CC number that you want to track. A single click on the button takes you to the next one, and you can cycle through all 4. A double click will change the mode. So each of these has 2 different modes. In normal mode, it will show from 0 to 127, the value of the CC. And there's a center mode, in which case it shows from -64 to +64, 0 being the midpoint. Think of like a pan knob, left and right, or in the case of my reverb, that's tied to the mix. So my wet and dry amounts are controlled by that. So the 0 there means a 50-50 split. So double clicking switches between those 2 modes. I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but there's a little dot that tells you you're in ranged mode. If the dot's not there, it's going from 0 to 120, 127. And then of course to exit, I just hold down program again. Now I'm back in run mode. So my sensitivity, I purposely have this pedal clamped at 123. So at its maximum value, fully depressed, it will never go above 123. I do that on purpose to give BFD3 a little bit of breathing room. If I'm sending it full velocity hits at 127, it has no way of being able to fudge the numbers a bit for anti-machine gunning and just its natural processing engine. So I clamped it at 123, and in a similar fashion, I never want it to go too low, so the lower end of it is clamped at 40. I've found through the years of tweaking my sensitivity algorithm that those values work well. And when I say sensitivity, I should probably clarify. What that is, it's velocity scaling. So when you're playing your Zendrum, you're producing values from 1 to 127. For some songs, I don't want that full range. I want to clamp it. You can, of course, play your triggers very lightly and get that effect. But I find that moving around my Zendrum, it makes it difficult to move quickly and still hit lightly. So what I do is I turn down the scaling so that my maximum hit, a hit that would produce 127, for instance, if I tune this down a bit, it's never going to go above 96 now. So that 127 hit, that maximum hit on my Zendrum, is only going to produce 96. And everything scales accordingly. It's a very natural sounding algorithm. If you use the stomp block, I use the same algorithm on the sensitivity knob on there. And then so for tuning, much like I clamp my sensitivity, I do the same on the tuning side. If I were to allow the pedal to go from 0 to 127 that high end, it's useless to me. The snares are tuned so high that they're comical. And again, on the low end, the same thing. It doesn't even sound like a drum at that point. So there's a narrow range that I want to tune, and I've found through the years that plus minus 20 works pretty good. So this display is in center mode. So 0 means that the snare is at its natural tuning state. And then I can go plus or minus 20 from there. So then this pedal goes from roughly 20, it's 21 here, down to about 44. So plus minus 20 from 64, 65, that midpoint of a 0 to 127. And then if I wanted to control the other two parameters, so again, this is sensitivity, this is tuning. There's an alternate mode where this is my bass response and this is my reverb. For me, I just turn on that shift rule, and now these pedals are affecting those other values. So I hope that demonstrated where the need for the CCC came from and has shown how that has solved my particular use case. I tried to make this as flexible as possible so that it can fit in a variety of different situations. Coincidentally, I needed 4 CC values, but I think any more than that might be too much. There's room on here to fit another one. I could have had 6 CC values, but I figure a matrix like that is a little bit hard to read. This is aimed at live performance. Last thing I want to be doing on stage is trying to figure out which one I'm looking at. I already have this progression memorized, that this is sense, this is tune, this is bass, this is reverb, but that was my particular use case, but hopefully it could work for yours. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you are interested in one of these, you can contact me directly or through the ZenDrumStudio.com website. There's a contact form there, or just comment below. I have enough parts on hand right now to make 4 or 5 of these. So a very limited production run, because I'm not sure yet what type of demand there is for something like this. The retail price for these would be about $150 US. It's roughly twice what a merge brick runs. These are $75 right now if you were to go to ZenDrum.com. There's obviously more sophistication with something like this. There's a microcontroller in there. There's a lot more parts. This is basically just a regulator. This doesn't have USB on it, so I didn't need to build an app. That considerably cuts down on the cost, but 150 is about as low as I could go on something like this and still make it worth my while to actually build these and support them. But like I say, I have enough parts right now to build 4 or 5. Typically with something like this, I already know beforehand if there's demand for it or not, and I will build up a couple dozen units and then put them in the store at the time that I announce the product. This one's a little bit different because I'm not really sure. This is something that obviously fits my needs. I had a very strong need for it, or otherwise I wouldn't have designed it and built it. But if you have a similar situation or see a benefit of having this in your rig, just let me know. And thanks for watching.